Hey family, this is Bishop Tony. Welcome again to another episode of Listen Up. So excited to have you guys here. You know, my intention is really just to add value to your lives, and I'm really blessed today. We have Dr. Rose Dillon with us. She's a clinical psychologist. She's amazing, and I think in this season that we're in, she can really just add value to us and give us some insight. We have so much going on in America as well as all over the world. So, hey, Dr. Rose, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Bishop, for having me.
I'm glad you're here.
I am honored.
We got a lot going on in the world with anxiety, depression, suicide, all of that. What's your take on all of this?
Well, you know, in this pandemic right now, a lot of people are suffering and affected with depression, anxiety, and suicide. The suicide rates are increasing. I think a lot of the isolation is playing a role in that. Right now, with the lack of support, being able to be around family and friends is increasing that depression and anxiety.
Wow. So what I just heard you say was that support is really important.
It's very important, Bishop. Even having a network, being able to see your doctor physically. I hear a lot of my patients talk about just not being able to even see their therapists and a face-to-face value rather than just on telepsych.
Yeah. You know, it's been amazing to me. My wife Jackie and I were talking about it recently. She's making some medical appointments, and she's talked to others, reached out. How did you guys manage this? And it's a whole new world out there. It's a whole new world. Yeah. So let me ask you something. How did you get started with this? I mean, clinical psychologist, how does that come about? Give me some of your background.
Well, I've been practicing for almost 10 years now. I started actually studying to go to medical school. I wanted to be a pediatrician. But then I was introduced by another friend who was telling me about the mental health field, and working in the prison system actually is part of my background, working with the forensic population and the incarcerated youth as well. So I became really interested just working with that population. Then it extended from working with that population to now I want to work with, you know, dealing with depression in minors and youth, and it just snowballed from there, and I just became even more interested in the mental health field and how can I help and how can I contribute into the community.
Awesome. You know, and I'm glad that you're doing this. I really appreciate you guys. And I know for me, kind of as I was coming up in Christianity, especially when I was like in my 30s or so, everything was just confess it away or just, you know, trust God. And there wasn't really an inclination. In fact, it was kind of frowned upon in some circles that if you had to go and get mental health, then we would go to the doctor physically, but we were supposed to be okay in our minds. So I appreciate you. Now tell me, what has been your experience? I want to come back to that anxiety and depression in a moment, okay?
Okay.
But in terms of Christians, have you found any resistance towards people that are Christians reaching out, or just what's been your experience around that?
I have. There is some misconceptions and some stigmas around mental health, especially in the Christian community, because you're thought of, you know, your faith should hold you near, that should protect you, that there's not a reason you should be depressed. You should always be happy and be thankful for what God gave you. So why are you depressed? So there's always these misconceptions and stigma circling around mental illness. And for a lot of Christians, just feeling that relationship with God being separated, you know, that's what causes a lot of the depression, not feeling as close to God, feeling maybe some abandonment, or feeling, why am I not delivered from this? Why am I going through these struggles? And a lot of patients that have worked with that struggle with that, they always come to this main element is that I feel like God is not hearing me. I feel like I'm going through this triumph and I'm still not being heard.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's been a struggle for a lot of people, especially with their faith, because, you know, you're taught growing up, and I was taught growing up, you pray, it goes away.
Yeah.
But with mental illness, especially depression, it affects the whole body. It affects not only your mind, your body, and your spirit. And so with that being said, it's not just something you just pray about and it just goes away. There's other things that have to be done to help with that process.
Got it. Okay. So, you know, one of the things I've noticed, we're really big at New Day on helping people understand their personality styles. You know, if you're the type like I am, what we call in a DISC profile, a DISC, I'm a D. I mean, I'm dominant, I get it done, make it happen. You know, wake up in the morning, already got 3 things in my mind I'm going to do in the next 20 minutes, and that's just how I'm wired. And I'm more of an introverted type, you know, I kind of do well by myself. I have literally flown from here to Africa and not spoken to anyone, you know, other than the flight attendant when she asked me what I want to eat or something. And I can do that well. But even for myself, now my wife is opposite. She get on an airplane, I'm telling you, she loves everybody, will learn about everybody, the grandchildren and where they vacationed last year, and that's her. But in this COVID season, and I'm saying COVID, with us being isolated, I'm noticing that it's impacting different people differently. Now, my wife, of course, and others, they just want to get out. They really got to connect. But what has amazed me, even introverts like myself, after a while, we want to connect too. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. So now let's talk about depression, because that's real. And as a pastor, and I'm gonna tell you this too, I know quite a number of pastors who are suffering with depression. Now we can't, you know, share it, and that's been my experience too, to minister to them. So depression is real, it really is. And tell me, what are you seeing right now? What are your thoughts about what we're doing, and what do you have that can help us?
And you hit on something really clear. Depression is real. And that's one of the misconceptions that people get. That, and even leaders, you know, especially in leadership, like you said, ministers, there's this stigma that if you're depressed, you're not going to be able to be a good leader. You're not going to be able to make the right decisions. So a lot of people, they fall to not getting the help, or, you know, letting ones know that they're suffering from depression. So I'm seeing that with depression comes with the stigma, as I stated earlier, and the misconception. It causes a lot of people not to seek help. Depression is one of those things that it takes more than just praying. It takes more than just, you know, I'm going to pray this away. It takes a lot of help, reaching out to networks. And as you know, with the isolation, that makes it very minimum to get the help that you need. I know in my experience, I tell a lot of my patients, the first thing you need to do is recognize that this is a normal thing, that it's not abnormal to have some things that you need help with. That, you know, making that as normal as possible, that people sometimes feel, especially in the Christian community, that it's a sin to be depressed, because that means I'm not trusting God.
Right.
But that's not true. And a lot of the misconceptions cause a lot of people to feel the lack of wanting to seek therapy, because, you know, God is who you seek, and that's it. I always tell my patients, you have to prioritize not only where you're at, but prioritize the things you can and cannot control. That's important when you're suffering from depression. Okay. Because being overwhelmed, the doubt and fear, which also causes anxiety, which is another thing that's occurring right now in the pandemic, that doubt and fear and that uncertainty that's causing a lot of people to feel is causing a lot of depression.
Mm-hmm. You know, the connecting part is, and in fact, one of our core values here at New Day is connect, worship, connect, equip, and serve. And so, even though I'm that's not my natural or my first default is to connect, you know, I'm more task oriented, if you would. But I did recognize it, and as Jack and I were praying when we started the church, it is important that we do connect with one another. None of us are sufficient within ourselves. We need one another. We really do. And I believe that, you know, God has gifted us all in a particular way. And so the way he's wired you, this is how you're adding value to the body to really help us persevere through a time like this. You know, Dr. Rose, one of my biggest concerns as a pastor, and especially not only here locally, but with the other churches also, is how are we going to make it through this season? You know, I was talking with a pastor last night in our network, and that was their concern too, about their people, because we can't see them before. At least on Sunday mornings, you would see them here, and now, you know, it's a little bit more difficult. So the connecting part. So even though they're isolated, and I know we got Zoom, we're doing videos and things like that, you have any other suggestions for them, or just how can they really cope with this? Definitely.
I think the main goal is to make sure you have a community around you. Yes, we only have Zoom for, you know, I know that worshiping is extremely important in church, and it is difficult sometimes to just do over Zoom. But having a network around you, meaning reaching out, developing groups. I know that with New Day, we have our small circle groups that allows us to connect to those around us. That's important. Having a routine, a daily routine. What's happening is a lot of people are in isolation and then it's just shut down. No routine. And so that's causing a lot of stress and anxiety because what do I do for the next hour? What do I do for the next day? So having a routine in place is important. Communicating, whether it's with your family or your spouse, the difficulties that you're having. Being in your own thoughts and in your own mind constantly and not communicating outwardly can cause a lot of.
That's huge. That's huge. You know what I found myself doing? This is hilarious. Well, for me it's hilarious. You might not laugh, but it's funny for me. Normally, I would say 95% of the time when I'm in my car, I'm listening to some kind of teaching, something instructional, something beneficial, just, catching up, or I'm on the phone with someone. But I was feeling, I don't know what I was feeling, but then I decided to turn on the radio. And somehow or another, hearing the DJs, and I'm funny, I won't stay on one station, I'm always moving, but it was just something about hearing those voices that proved beneficial to me. So that connecting, I guess, that's huge. But now you said having a routine, having structure is important.
Yes. And the reason that's so important is because idle mind, as you know, can be the enemy's playground. So when you're at home, and especially for kids, we have all these parents that are now becoming teachers. Yeah. I'm one, and that I have my 3 boys at home. And, just having that routine set not only allows you to get out of your own thoughts, but allows you to feel like an accomplishment for that day. You're not just sitting idle. You're really renewing yourself. And for me, renewing the spirit is important. So I stay in the Word. I do a different study every day, or maybe I'll do a different activity. We are in isolation. We are, in some parts in quarantine, but that doesn't stop us from being able to do something within our isolation and quarantine. And it's important to understand there's some boundaries, but there are some things that you can do within those boundaries.
How can a person recognize that they're depressed? And I have to ask that because I generally got one speed. and sometimes, honestly, when I'm talking with people, and there are times I struggle with being empathetic because I'm just not wired that way. I just don't, see it that way. But I know it's real. And so I always acknowledge people. I mean, I know that. I'm always going to, whatever they're saying is valid. It's real to them. How can someone determine if they're really depressed or if they're just having a sad day or...
Well, there's a sad day, and there's a sad day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
That constant change in the mood that is staying steady. Wow. Not only that, the hopelessness, the feel of I just can't accomplish anything. I don't want to, or the lack of pleasure, the lack of doing things, the lack of wanting to spend time, the lack of interest of wanting to do things. Okay. So that is one of the keys for us as doctors that we recognize. We ask you, do you have lack of motivation? On a scale from 1 to 10, do you think your mood is like a 5 every day? It changes, but that sadness that follows you day to day to day, that feeling of, I just can't just shake this. I don't know why I don't feel good today. And then Monday comes, I don't know why I didn't feel good on Sunday. So, and also there's some other things like, there's those who sleep all day, Wow. Some people sleep all day, maybe they're tired, but these are things that there's different elements that come with it.
Got it. Now, you mentioned something when we first started about anxiety and depression. They're a little different, or can you distinguish those for me?
They are. Anxiety is something like a constant worry that doesn't, like, let's say, for an example, with the COVID, a constant worry every day, a lot of us have it, that this will never go away. But it's such a worry that it's actually causing you some deficits in your regular life. Wow. It's a constant worry, a constant feeling. Depression is more of something that has to do with the mood, like, the sadness, the feeling, how you feel emotionally. Okay. With anxiety and depression, sometimes they go hand to hand because, with anxiety, fear, the uncertainty, and then when you start to feel anxiety, sometimes you'll start feeling depressed. Now I'm sad that that can't change. Now I'm sad that this COVID's going to remain around. So there is a difference between the two. One has to do with more of the worry, the constant worry, and the other one has to do with more of the mood and how you're feeling.
It just popped up in my heart. Grief. Yeah, grief. What could people be struggling with grief, or they possibly grieving something during this season too? Is that?
Oh, yes. And not only are they grieving, when you take away elements that you're used to automatically having and say, now you can't, like you said, you're an introvert. Yeah. But if someone says, you're an introvert, you like to stay home, but I just want to let you know you can't now leave home. Like you can't do it, even if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. It's like grieving away the ability to do what you want to do at that time. And a lot of people are suffering where they feel like it's a loss. Like I'm losing all the abilities to go places, see my family. Some individuals are grieving an actual loss. Right now there's over 15 million people affected in the US. We have had 150,000 deaths. So there's a lot of grief going on right now, and it's continuing to increase.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, so we have, people are anxious, anxiety, you got depression, now you got grief. That's a lot of death that has occurred, and I actually hadn't thought about that until you just mentioned it. So just throughout our land right now, that's a whole cultural shift, that is something.
It's a new normal.
Wow.
And to have that new normal being in place, especially for those who are already in a transition in their life where they lost their job, they lost a family member, or maybe they're even suffering through depression or anxiety, and then now have to go from all that, and go into this new normal that's still going. Yeah. It's definitely causing I'm seeing an increase in mental illness. I'm seeing an increase in suicide. Our suicide rate has increased. Okay. It's definitely a hard time for a lot of individuals.
You've shared with me before about suicide and just the effects, because that's something you're an expert at too. Well, I mean, that's an area you work in also, is suicide. How is that? What's the suicide? How is that looking in this season?
Right now, it's women between the age of 25 and 40 have the highest suicide rate. Really? And it's increasing. And that can be contribute to a lot of women are at home right now that have to, men too, but a lot of women are at home and are playing several different roles as far as a mother and a teacher. The stress, some individuals have lost their jobs, but I'm seeing an increase in all ages, but it is being reported that, women and between that age is the highest rate right now.
Wow. I find that amazing. It's sad, but I find it amazing. Now, you've also had, I'm understanding, younger children, younger people that are.
Yeah, we have. I'm currently working with a crisis line, and we're seeing a plethora of different individuals who call as young as 11 years old. Wow. Because, with children, you have to think school and their peers were their out for a lot of children. That was their network. Being around their peers, going to school, that was the network. When you're taking that away from a child and saying, now this is your new normal, it causes a lot of anxiety. It causes a lot of depression. I mean, I've had children as young as 11 years old call me with pills in their hand, wanting to commit suicide, because they're not just because of the uncertainty, they're also in fear. They don't know what to expect. Am I going to be next to die? What does this look like? Why is this happening? Those questions that as a child, it's difficult to wrap their head around. All this is happening. I'm not going to school. I'm going to school virtually now. When do I get to see my friends? So those type of questions are coming up a lot in our youth.
Yeah. Well, we often quote the scripture during church when it's a high moment and the Spirit is moving. And well, I come from an old Baptist background, and somebody to get up and say, could it be that we're here for such a time as this? But I literally think, people like yourselves are here for such a time as this. This thing is, it's life-changing. It's altered us. It's caused us to just have to approach things differently. Yes. It's so funny, even for myself, and I talk about being an introvert, but one of my friends, a great pastor, he has this network called Passionate Pastors, and he would get us together once a quarter, and that was so much fun. Even being an introvert, I miss connecting with everyone and all the other guys and seeing them, and we come together and encourage one another and share those things. So I hear what you're saying about the networking part. Now let's go back to as a Christian, you know, as believers, some of the things we should be doing. In fact, yeah, you just part of you guys, you and some others ladies have put out a book, a devotional.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Very excited. It's released. It just released today.
Okay.
It's over 130 women,
Okay.
and it's, I mean, international. I mean,
Okay.
it's Dr. Kimberly Ellison is the one who brought it together.
Okay.
She had a vision, and that God gave her, and it manifests into this amazing project with 130 women. My auntie Wanda Dixon is part of it. My best friend is the one, Tia Lewis, who actually introduced me into the project. And it's a devotional of 130 women coming together, and they all have a scripture that they held fast during their time of triumph, during their time, and what was their testimony. And they all put out a devotional, and it's an amazing project. I'm so excited.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, you know, I'm excited I'm looking forward to getting a copy myself. And I just want to encourage all the ladies at New Day. We're going to make sure that we do our best to provide you all with a copy of that, because one of the things that's crucial to me, and you know, as a pastor, is your personal devotional time. You guys have been in life groups. You know, I've been challenging you to make sure you're worshiping every day. And you don't have to have a voice to sing, but really making melody within your heart, and then setting aside that time, not only in worship, but also to get devoted to the Word. And one of the things, like you just said, for me, I enjoy reading people when they've overcome something and how they persevered and what they stood on, and that builds up my faith, and I pray that it does the same with you guys there. And so one of our own, Dr. Rose, she's one of those authors in the book, so I'm going to encourage you guys, you know, we'll make sure that you can follow, we'll get a link out to you guys so that you guys can all get a copy. And I want to encourage you too, is not only get one for yourself, but make sure that you're getting some for your family and friends, because we all going to need to encourage one another, especially during this season. Well, Dr. Rose, we're going to do some more work with you, and we're going to make sure she's going to be available on some Zoom calls so you guys can call in and personally interact with her. We have some things coming up in August that she'll be a part of too. So we're glad you're here, part of our local church, and just thank God for you and your husband, Minister Bobby, and glad you guys have been here with us. Anything you want to close out with? Last minute words?
I just want to say that just remember that this is a triumph time, but this is a temporary time. And God is still with us. And we have to remember that even in this time, we have to find some peace of joy. And so I just pray for everyone out there and to continue to be safe. And if you are suffering from depression or having suicidal thoughts or even suffering from anxiety, there is someone you can call. We have a warm line. There's a San Diego crisis line, and that number is 1-800-724-4270. And that is a number that you can call. And we also have a warm line. It provides peer support if you just need someone to talk to. And that number is 1-800-930-9276.
Amen. Dr. Rose Dillon, thank you so much. Okay. Family, Jackie and I love you guys. Keep praying for us. We're praying for you guys. Talk to you again soon now. Stay blessed.